All right, it's time for our weekly hour with John Middlekauff, who will eventually take some time off. He got married last weekend. Let's do a few minutes on March Madness. So, the last 3 weekends, this is what I do. I sit around and watch streaming shows at night, and I watch college basketball most of the day. It was pretty obvious if you watch college basketball. The SEC got 14 teams in. I had said this multiple times on FS1. It just looked different. I mean, the Big Ten didn't even look like the SEC. SEC is deeper, more athletic, better offensive teams, better scoring options. Michigan State's as good as any Big Ten team I saw this season, and they don't really have any shooters. They rebound, they defend, they have a great coach in Tom Izzo, but they'll struggle to score, against good teams. I think the SEC is going to fly through this. I have Auburn winning the national championship, battle hardened. I think all these SEC teams are going to do pretty well in the tournament. Florida, Auburn are exceptional because they've played each other. I mean, Florida wasn't great at the beginning of the year. They've been on fire. Now, a lot of times the hottest team, it doesn't really translate. But I watched Auburn play 2 or 3 times deep, multiple guys that could give you 12, 15 points, good coach, good size, aggressive. Houston is a very good basketball team, but I'll take a couple of SEC teams in Duke. I'll take Florida, Auburn, and probably Duke. Cooper Flag will be healthy by the time the tournament rolls around. The difference is when you watch college football, last year, Ohio State, year before Michigan, year before that, Georgia, you get the Joe Burrow LSU team. You can see the NFL. You can see all these players, these 12 guys that are going to go to the NFL. Last year's UConn team, which went 37-3, I picked them to win. That's the easiest pick I've ever made. That team looked a little bit like an NBA team. Big size, great versatility, huge physicality, didn't make a ton of mistakes. A guy that could coach in the NBA, Coach Hurley. That was a really good college basketball team, the best one I've seen in years. They even against Purdue in the national championship, not really that competitive. It's different. This team, you're going to see a lot of close games. I mean, I watched Houston play Arizona. A lot of people are picking them to win the national championship. Imminently beatable, great defensive team. But I think if you watch college basketball, because it's such a young sport and the really talented guys are one and done, so even the guys that are really special, many of them aren't developed offensively. But when you watch college basketball, it doesn't look like the NBA. The offenses often just dump it down to the big guys. Purdue and Zach Edey, just here's our big, dump it down, and it's going to dominate. So I'm going to go with the most athletic teams I saw. I'm going to go with the teams that played in the hardest conference easily. No conference has ever had 14 teams in it. I'm not going to, these people that are upset that North Carolina's got a play-in game because they had a terrible record, 1-12 against quad one teams. They had some good out-of-conference wins before the season started. Not worth the argument. That used to be fun 10, 15 years ago, arguing for that team to get in. But, if they win one game, that's probably the ceiling. And the team, I think we all kind of know the teams that have a chance to win. And I also think when teams are close, I like experienced coaches. I like Rick Pitino. I don't think Michigan State can win 4 games, but I like Izzo or coaches that have been in this spot before. That's an advantage. A lot of this stuff is going to end up being like 72-70 and take the better coaches because I don't think there's a lot of teams. Again, Cooper Flag, if healthy, will be the best team in the tournament, and maybe he's just good enough, to just take them to 6 wins. But I don't have any strong conviction on it. Last year I took UConn and I thought that was, I watched UConn and Gonzaga and Duke a lot. Those are my teams. It was pretty obvious. They were just bigger and more physical and push teams around. And that was an easy one. I'll go Auburn, but I have really no conviction. I think SEC teams will play very well in the tournament. Okay, we bring on John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, former NFL scout, newly married. I just gave my pick, Auburn, the first time in school history. They're a #1 seed. I was saying, when you watch college football at the highest levels, you can see the NFL. You could see Ohio State's players. You're like, oh, those guys are going to be great NFL players. College basketball, it's really difficult. The best players do one and done. Do you watch a ton of college hoops?
No, not really. I used to a lot growing up, but I would say over the 8 to 10 years, let's face it, the product's been diminished. I dive in come Thursday, Friday, but Rutgers has 2 guys that are probably going to go in the top 5 and didn't sniff the tournament. How's that? This basketball, this isn't football. I mean, the two guys on the court at all times, and I checked their stats the other day. They both were good this year. It's stuff like that like, I grew up, Allen Iverson, Shaq, all those, the top guys
Oh
played
yeah.
college basketball, and it was awesome. You're a Tark guy. I'm a Fresno State guy. When Tark went to Fresno State with Chris Herron, I loved college basketball as a kid, but it's not really the same. Though the NIL era, little bounce back with Cooper Flag and some of the guys recently.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's hard to tell a 20-year-old what college basketball was like 20 years ago. It's the only sport that's less talented than it was 20 years
Crazy.
ago. Boxing's probably the second because some guys who would have boxed went into
Yeah.
UFC, and it used to be you'd get Patrick Ewing coming back for a third year and Tim Duncan and Chris Paul. So it's just, I mean, I always tell young people, go watch Phi Slamma Jamma. Go watch the highlights on YouTube. That's what college basketball, and they never won a natty. There was a team that had Chris Mullen, Bill Wennington, Walter Berry, Mark Jackson at St. John's, and did not win a national championship. Phi Slamma Jamma had the Clyde Drexler, Larry Mashew, Rob Young. I'm missing two or three guys. Did not win a national championship. So it's just different. It's like, again, Cooper Flag's great. If Cooper Flag came back 2 more years and they had three other NBA guys, that would have been Duke
There
20
is
years
talk
ago.
about him coming back. Now, wake me when that actually happens. I am fascinated though, and you and I talk so much college football during the fall, and we both love it. And obviously, the growth of the SEC over the last 10, 15 years, really the Saban effect. I could be wrong
Yeah.
here, but I thought I saw on Twitter like 15, 20 minutes ago, the SEC just set a record for 14 teams.
Yeah, 14
And
teams.
I've been fascinated. When I got married last week in Tennessee, my brother and I and my brother-in-law, we played golf at Vanderbilt's golf course. Peyton Manning was out there.
Yeah.
Their clubhouse at the Vanderbilt golf course was as big as any clubhouse, non like Olympic club I've ever seen. That wasn't even the own clubhouse at the golf course. The SEC money, because of the football programs over the last 15, 20 years, you'd know better than me, but when I think SEC basketball, forever Kentucky, and there was always,
Yeah.
Florida, Billy Donovan. Now, I know they got 14 teams, but they got five or six that should win the national championship. I just saw Nate Oates had a quote that anything less than a Final Four, this Alabama basketball is a disappointment. So at the gym, I was watching Tennessee, Florida today. It was fantastic. It's like, how good is
Oh, yeah, it's
so
great.
the talent in the SEC because of the football money, baseball, they dominate, golf, they dominate,
Yes.
basketball, they've been good. They have clearly taken another step right these last 4 or 5 years with the money behind it.
Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. I watched Michigan State, and Michigan won the Big Ten tournament. I watched some of that. I've seen Purdue play. I've seen Michigan State play. And I've seen Oregon
Yeah.
play, and UCLA multiple times. My takeaway is the Big Ten's just. I mean, Michigan won the Big Ten tourney. I think they're a fifth seed. So it's the only sport where the conference championships have no impact often on the
No.
seeding. So no, it's just I think for people that haven't been to the South, they may struggle. So, like I was talking to an SEC fan the other day, and he goes, "We really can't compete with Ohio State and Michigan money. USC now, their collective in football is 18 million. Oregon's is sky's the limit. They can still kind of compete, but there are the big dogs in the Big Ten are really at the top of the food chain. Texas being, the obvious dominant the minute they walked into the SEC. That's the Rockefellers of that conference. They just have as much money as they need. But in the other sports, the Big Ten money gets funneled to football. But in the other sports, I watch actually a lot of Big Ten basketball over the last 3 or 4 weeks. It just doesn't look like SEC basketball. I watched Auburn play probably in January once, February twice, and I watched them here in March, for 30 minutes each time. As you said, it's just athletes everywhere and deep. They have like 8 guys who can give you double figures if it was their night. So it's just different. And whereas in the Big Ten, football makes you a lot of money, and some basketball teams do. In the SEC, baseball
Crushes.
makes LSU a lot of money. It's a different ball game. So And I also think what you're seeing is in football, John, I think those Pac 12 teams that moved into the Big Ten are fine. The weather argument's weak because your last game, USC, UCLA play each other at the end of the season. So the truth is, your last game is like, November 17th. You may have a cold game at Penn State. It's really tough on the basketball teams. I looked at UCLA's travel schedule this year. I mean, it's like it got an NBA feel. You're back across the country all the time. And that's where I think the Pac-12 teams are really, those four teams that went into the Big Ten. I think in basketball, it's really hard for UCLA and USC and Washington and Oregon. When you're playing multiple games a week, I don't think they'll have great impact in that conference
Yeah,
for
I
a
saw
while.
Mick's had some great lines this year. One of his was like they had went to like around the Statue of Liberty multiple times throughout the season, and all the Big Ten teams are complaining about coming out west. He's like, "You guys are in 0 degrees. You're coming out here to sunny Southern California. It's 78 degrees. Give me a break. You guys are having the time of your life coming out
Yeah.
here. For us, it's more difficult, but that's what they all signed up for. The more money that comes along with
Yep.
it. That's where Texas and Oklahoma, the travel is clearly not nearly as prohibitive and difficult. I mean, all these people get to come home. Even the Big Ten. I mean, one problem I think for the West Coast teams in basketball is they get stuck out there. Guy Haberman calls games for the Big Ten. All the core teams of the Big Ten go home after games and then go back to their opponent when they play 2 games in a week. That clearly isn't the case for USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon. They're just kind of stuck, and that's just listen. This move was made for football, and basketball is kind of along for the ride here.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I think UCLA and USC are both feeling it.